Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الملك الحق المبين اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على النبي الأمي العربي الحاشمي القرشي المكي المدني صاحب الوقار والسكينة المدفون بالمدينة العبد المميز ورسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد أبو القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب محكم مبين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى صلوات Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Quranic verse that I've just recited, it's the 23rd verse of Surah Ash-Shura, chapter 42. And we discussed this last time, especially Maulana discussed this. So I won't go into the details, but especially for the youth, I want to just share some insights about this verse, because yesterday it was discussed at a higher level. Allah Ta'ala is saying, I do not ask you for this message any payment, only goodwill towards my nearest of kin. So in this regard, what I want to talk about is three important aspects. Going into the details of this particular verse, what does repayment actually mean? The second point I want to talk about is related to what is the role that we need to adopt as a wakil of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, and who is the wakil of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra other than humans. And third are some historical points that we need to discuss, and we need to understand what was the role of those who were the enemies of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra. Because it is one thing to consider that yes, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra is amazing, is beyond this world. But there is a different aspect that we need to understand, that we cannot also say that the companions who were hypocrites and who were the enemies of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra were also good. And how can they be bad? Because they were one of the earlier companions. So you cannot be with the two sides at the same time. You need to take a side. If you are with Sayyidah Fatima Zahra and you claim that you have true ma'rifat and mawaddat of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, then you cannot claim that these companions who were earlier with the Prophet were also good. So we're going to talk about some of those examples as well. So the verse of Surah Ash-Shura, verse 23, which says, in which Allah Ta'ala says, O Prophet, convey that I do not ask anything from you in repayment except for the closeness and the love of my nearest to kin. This has some really profound implications. It is not the Prophet saying that I am asking you as this payment. It is Allah saying that this is the repayment that you need to give. And if you think about payment, it is really important to understand what is the purpose of payments in our life. For example, if Hassan or someone else, or myself, I take me as an example. I take a car which is parked in the side, which has the keys in the car, and I start driving the car. I think of that car as my car. I do all the things that are good. I take my friends from one place to another. I do all the things that taking patients from their homes to hospital. But after doing all of those good deeds, based on the car that I do not own, if a policeman stops me, what would the policeman first ask me? How good have you done with the car? Or where is the registration of the car? Where is the title of the car? If we do not have the title, if we do not have the registration, no matter how good we have done with the car, it doesn't matter in front of the judge. Judge will say, what happened? Where did you get this car? In the first point. And when we understand that how do we get the title and registration of any car, you have to make the payment that the person is asking for. And once that payment is made, that person then signs a title over and you get the registration that now this car belonging to you. So until and unless you actually pay the demanded price of anything, you cannot actually own that thing. Similarly, if we are not giving the price that Allah has asked of this religion, and we're doing everything like we are praying, we are fasting, even though in the wrong way, but we are trying to at least be hungry for that period of time, we are never going to repay or pay the payment that is required to actually claim that we had the true religion. And that is a really important point. And that's why when you come to the day of judgment and a person says that I have done all of these things, Allah will ask, where is the title, where is the registration? Where is the registration that you claim that this deen, this religion, because of which you've done all these things, is there? And I already told you what are the key criteria. It is not that I have kept the secret. You are many more of you remember the Quran better than those who are Christians or Jews. You remember all these verses, but still you ignore the repayment. And the repayment for all the amal, for all the verses of the Quran, for all the prayers and everything that the Prophet taught in terms of akhlaq, in terms of morality, in terms of every single thing. What was that repayment? That was one thing. That was the love of the qurba. And who's the qurba? That is the love of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra in the hearts of the mu'mineen and the Muslimin in general. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So without that payment, we cannot claim that we have the true religion. And that's why it becomes really important to understand why is that payment so important. Because the true religion comes from Ahlul Bayt al-Islam. It doesn't come from any other source. From any other source, it's only deception, it's only confusion. The true religion comes only from and through the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam. And then there is an interesting narration in Bihar and Anwar, where Sayyidah Fatima Zahra asked one day when Imam Ali alayhi salam was going on a battle, on an expedition. She said, I hope that we had a wakil. I hope that there was someone who would take care of our affairs. At that point, the 9th verse of Surah Muzammil was revealed, in which Allah says, Allah is the God of East and West, and He is the best of wakil. So the wakil of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra is not a human. It's not an ordinary creation. It's Allah Himself. And that is why after 1400 years, after manipulation of history, after manipulation of narratives for 1400 years, more than a millennia, we are still talking about what happened to Sayyidah Fatima Zahra. Even after the governments were against Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, even after the governments were against the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they were not able to hide the message, hide the fact that her door was burned. She was murdered, she was martyred, her son Mohsin was martyred in the womb. They could not hide that fact because the wakil is of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra is not an ordinary person. It's Allah Himself. So then the question becomes, can we play a role in this wakalat? Can we play a role in being the representative of Allah by building the case, by actually fighting the case of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra? And that's a very important question, because without understanding what happened to Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, we cannot do that. So there are two important points that all of us should understand, especially the youth. They should understand that whenever you want to understand Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, and we have discussed many different aspects. If I am to recap the topics that we have discussed, especially for example, Zayan and those people who have been coming for the past month, we have been discussing about creation of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra from Noor, first of creation, the source of creation. We have talked about Sayyidah Fatima Zahra as the gift of Allah to humanity, not only humanity but to all the creation. We talked about the role of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra in the evolution itself, from the time for eternity. And yesterday when Maulana talked about the role of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra as the source of repayment of this message of Islam, we know her virtues. Now, one thing that I would encourage all of us, especially the youth, to do in your personal life, to actually invoke Sayyida Fatima Zahra in your daily life. When you're praying, you should say, Ya Allah, accept my dua bihaqqa Fatima Zahra. And see the result. If you're going for an exam, just pray 2 rakat and say, Oh Allah, make me successful in the exam bihaqqa Fatima Zahra. And see what happens. Because unless you actually apply this in your life with practical example, you will not increase your marifat. Knowing is one thing, but not actually experiencing it is another thing. So that's one aspect. It's a lesson for all the children, even for the adults, to apply that in our life. Even if there is a difficulty in our life, if there is a situation, just use that as an example and see what happens, what miracles happen. Because once you see that, you will recognize that she is not an ordinary lady, like the regular Muslims claim. So that's one aspect. Now, in order to be a true wakil, a true attorney of Sayyida Fatima Zahra, you need to understand one thing else. What happened and who did what to Sayyida Fatima Zahra? This is important because many times in our centers, in our areas, because of being politically correct, because of some forces that we cannot take the names. And that's why it's important to highlight what happened to Sayyida Fatima Zahra and who was involved. Many of these things on the day of when her door was burned, I'm not going to talk about those because we learn about those in the majalis without taking the names. But I'm going to take the names of these people, what were their roles before that particular event. Because there are 3 questions that I want every one of you to understand, especially when someone else comes and says, oh, by the way, these companions were with the Prophet, they fought fights with the Prophet, they were early converts to Islam. How is this possible that they were wrong? How is this possible? These are just fabricated narrations, these are not embedded in truth. So then the question comes, have they ever denied the order of the Prophet in the life of the Prophet? That's question number 1. If you understand that these people who claim to be the Muslims at the earlier times, did they deny the orders of the Prophet while the Prophet was still alive? Because if they can deny the Prophet while he was still alive, they can absolutely deny the Prophet's order to follow Sayyida Fatima Zahra and the love of Ahlul Bayt after he passed away. So that's question number 1. The second question is, do we know that there were evidence of their animosity, their jealousy towards the household of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, to the household of Imam Ali alayhi salam from the very beginning, from the time of the Prophet? And third question is, why did Sayyida Fatima Zahra did not allow people to attend her burial? Why was it kept a secret for 1400 years? What is the lesson that we get from that secret which keeps the humanity, which keeps Muslims in a state of mystery? So the first question, were these Muslims who claimed to be the companions of the Prophet, did they do something wrong in the early days of Islam, before the Prophet's passing? The answer is yes, and I'll give you 3 examples. When the Muslims were going for Hudaybiyah to perform Umrah, and they were stopped at the place of Hudaybiyah. At that point, there is a famous event that people know as Bayt al-Rizwan, where the Prophet asked every single companion to give allegiance so that they will not leave the Prophet and they will accept the order of the Prophet, whether it is in peace treaty or in fighting. When the bay'ah was given, then the peace treaty happened, known as Treaty of Hudaybiyah. After that, the Prophet said that we're going to break our ihram right here. We're not going to enter Makkah. Except for a few companions, including Imam Ali alayhi salam, many companions said, no, we will not break our ihram over here. Even Umar bin Khattab said that today the degree of confusion that I have on this prophethood has never been of this sort before. This is the second caliph doubting the Prophet after pledging allegiance based on which they say that they are Raziullah. They broke the allegiance within a few days of making that. The second point, right after Bayt al-Rizwan, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, these people went to Khaybar. The Prophet took the expedition to Khaybar. In the expedition to Khaybar, there was something, again the Prophet made a promise, you will not return. Either you win or you are martyred, you will not return without defeating the castles. The first day Abu Bakr went, he returned. Second day Umar was sent, he returned. For 39 days Muslims kept going and keep coming back. Every time they kept on breaking the pledge, the allegiance to the Prophet. So in their life they broke the pledge to the Prophet and they denied the Prophet. The third time, right before the martyrdom, the passing of the Prophet asked these, along with Umar, Abu Bakr and others, bigger companions, the most who were part of the conspiracy, to go with the army of Usama. They said, how can we go with the army of Usama? He's young. The Prophet was very upset. They did not go with the army of Usama. They stayed in Medina. And again, ignoring the order of the Prophet in his life. So if they can ignore the order of the Prophet in his life, what is preventing them from disobeying the Prophet after he passed away? And the reason why this, again, there is a very important reason for the children. Why did they refuse the order? If the Prophet tells you, Nakash, one thing, that you need to do this, would you not do that? Absolutely. Everyone would do that. Why? Because everyone knows that he is Prophet appointed by Allah. What he's saying is not what the Prophet is saying, but what Allah is saying. But these people did not believe that. They thought that he's not just a Prophet. He was a regular person who was just giving his orders from his own whim. They never thought of him as a divinely appointed Prophet, except for when there were some revelations. So that's point number one. The second point, were they jealous of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam? The answer is yes. And there are two examples that you should understand, especially those who have many non-Shia Muslim friends. Nakash, for yourself, like you have a lot of people in his school who are non-Shia Muslims. When you think about were they jealous, a simple example, the answer is yes, but I'll give you a proof. When the Muslims after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah were sent for Hajj, Abu Bakr was sent as the leader for Hajj with Surah Bara. But then Angel Jibreel alayhi salam came and he said, O Prophet, either you or someone like you should convey this message, no one else. And then Imam Ali alayhi salam was sent with that surah so that he can deliver the message. But look at what Abu Bakr did at that time. Abu Bakr did not stay in that caravan going to Makkah. He returned back really angry, and there are narrations that he did not even say proper salam to the Prophet, asking why I was returned back from that expedition. And then when the verse in Surah Nur which said these houses need to be raised, he asked, is this the house of Fatima and Ali among those houses that need to be raised? Why would you ask someone out of like all the hundreds of thousands of houses in Medina pointing towards one house? Because he had that envy towards Sayyidah Fatima Zahra and Imam Ali alayhi salam. Because all of them wanted to marry Sayyidah Fatima Zahra when the time of marriage was there. So they had that jealousy from the early beginning. And the last point I want to highlight is what she did, what Sayyidah Fatima Zahra did by keeping her grave, her burial secret, is something that is a master class. If her grave was not hidden, if her burial was not in a secret, everyone could have claimed that we were part of that burial. Everything was normal. But by stopping people from coming, she clearly highlighted those who kept quiet, those who perpetrated. She was not happy with those people. And she made a responsibility for all of us that whenever we come across these injustices, whenever we come across that this happened or this did not happen, it is our responsibility, especially when we do not have taqiyya, to highlight what happened to Sayyidah Fatima Zahra. Because if we do not, then we will be among those people who were in Medina. They were among the Ansar, who actually were Muslims, who did not participate in the burning of the house, but they kept quiet. And because they kept quiet, they were prohibited from attending that burial. And this is a scorecard for eternity. For eternity, that everyone who is against Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, they have to think twice what they're taking for the hereafter. Now, bringing all of these things together, it is a responsibility for all of us to actually stand up for justice. We see in this world where we live, we see that when the Shias of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra and Imam Ali alayhi salam, when they defend the oppressed, the Muslims whose oppression is happening, these Muslims who do not believe in the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, but they keep quiet. They keep quiet when their own brothers are being massacred. They keep quiet when Shias are helping. But at the same time, as soon as they get an opportunity against the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they go towards that opportunity. So this hypocrisy that Sayyidah Fatima Zahra wanted to highlight, it happens in this world today. It is happening right now. And it is our responsibility to teach our next generation of what happened, so that the message continues, and also to be very open about these injustices. Do not be quiet. Why are we afraid of highlighting these? This is part of the covenant of Ghadir. That's the reason why Sayyidah Fatima Zahra stood up defending Imam Ali alayhi salam. That was the only reason she went into the court of Abu Bakr, to defend what happened, what they had usurped. But if we do not do that, we need to understand where we stand in the history, on the side of who are defending Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, or on the side who are just being quiet, who are the side who are being politically correct, assuming that our world will continue as is. No, there will be time when we have to prepare, when we have to say that no, this is right versus that is wrong. Again, in a place where we do not have taqiyya. Because where we have taqiyya, where we have to protect our lives, our families, yes, we can keep quiet. But where we do not have taqiyya, we have to stand up against injustice. Because if we do not, our heart will be dark. Our heart will not be pure. Our heart will be attached to this world. We will not be prepared for death. We will not have true taqwa. And when the time comes, when the sound comes from the heavens that the 12th Imam is emerging, and when the time comes to go to Makkah to defend the Imam, we will be like, oh, our life is comfortable over here. We're not ready. Because we are attached to this world, because we have never stood up for the right even when we had the opportunity. With that, I request all of you to raise your hands and make the dua that may Allah help those Muslims who do not have any helper right now. They're being killed right and left every single day. And there is no one